Hi, ladies. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Wonderful. Hi to everyone who is here, and we appreciate you showing up to this special live show tonight with Women in Crime and Court Junkie. I'm Megan from Women in Crime and Direct Appeal Podcast, and tonight we are covering the Jodi Arias case. We've actually gotten a number of requests to cover this case, so I hope that the people who wrote us are listening tonight. So what we're going to do is start with a brief recap of the crime and the sensational trial that followed, but we're also going to focus a lot more tonight on the updates on the case and also what our opinions are of Jodi Arias's behavior and whether the criminal justice system got it right or not. At the end, we'll also take some questions, so feel free to send in any as you have them along the way about this case, about our shows, about our backgrounds. We'll try to answer things that are of interest to you. Before we get started, though, I'm going to turn it over to the other ladies here to let them introduce themselves, and hopefully you can tell the listeners a little bit about how we all connected.
Sure. Okay, so I'm Jillian from Court Junkie. And first of all, thank you all for tuning in. This is very exciting and nerve-wracking. I don't do a lot of lives. This is my very first one, so go easy on me. I do have some wine.
Oh.
Right here. I don't know if you guys do too. Okay, great. Cheers to everybody, no matter what you're drinking. And yeah, so I met Amy at the True Crime Podcast Festival in Chicago last year. And I don't remember who approached who, but we just started talking about our mutual podcasts and our interests and things like that. And we all sort of kept in touch and knew we wanted to collaborate somehow, some way or another. I don't know if you guys get this a lot, but I know the Jodi Arias case is like a constant request. And it's just
time.
Right. And it's one that it's like, I don't know if I can really add anything to it. So I think, this IG Live, we kind of came up with this idea. So, hopefully we can add a little something to it.
All right. I'm Amy from Women in Crime and also Direct Appeal Podcast. So it is nice to be here. I don't want to spend any time. I want to dive right in here. So.
Okay, well, ladies, thanks for the brief intro, and I'm going to start by taking us to the crime. Most of you actually know a lot about the crime in question, but I really think that we should do a brief refresher before we get into the updates. So we are going to go back to June 9th, 2008. And it was on this afternoon that, and after several unreturned calls, that a group of friends decided to go over to the home of 30-year-old Travis Alexander, who lived in Mesa, Arizona. Travis had been the type of guy who would call you back. He never missed work. And apparently by that time, he had missed conference calls and a number of other events that really alarmed his friends. So they went to his house, and he shared a house, a fairly sizable house, with a couple of roommates. When they got there, they knocked on the door, and one of his roommates, Zach, answered, and they asked where Travis was. And Zach said, oh, well, he's actually in Hawaii on a trip. Now, that was a red flag immediately, because one of the three friends that went to the door was a woman named Mimi Hall. You probably remember her from the trial. I'm sure a lot of people do. And she said, no, he's not in Hawaii, because I'm supposed to be in Hawaii with him, and we're not leaving until tomorrow. So the friend, the roommate, said, okay, let me go check what's going on in his room. And this is probably, for this guy, I feel terrible, because it was probably the worst day of his life, if you really think about it. When he went upstairs, he opened the door to Travis's room, and he saw what many of us have seen is just a blood-covered crime scene, from wall-to-wall, rugs everywhere. And as he walked in to look and see where Travis was, he found him in the shower in what has been very much described as Travis being in a crumpled up position, because his body was kind of rolled over into a ball. So, I mean, horrified, I'm sure. The friends immediately called the police to get them over there. And when the police came, they did some investigating, and they started talking to them, asking them questions. And one of the things that they asked right away was, did they know who would do something like this to Travis? Did they know who would want to hurt Travis Alexander? And they all immediately said Jodi Arias. Travis, when they discovered him, by the way, he had been dead for 5 days. And I know that police were a little skeptical at first because he had roommates and they wondered, how did you not notice this? You know, we all know that there's a smell to a decomposing body, but they truly didn't. As I said, the house was also sizable. They might not have interfaced with each other very often. When police discovered Travis, or when they looked at the body, the injuries sustained by Travis, he had about 27 to 29 stab wounds, which is a lot and severe in itself, but he also had his throat slit, and it was slit so badly that it was seemingly, he was decapitated for all intents and purposes. And he was also shot in the head. So I think it's fair to say that we could describe this as a brutal crime. Jodi Arias, coming back to her. As I said, the friends immediately mentioned her. And also, 28-year-old Jodi Arias, who was back in her home state of California, contacted the investigators pretty quickly. I'm not sure if you guys recall that, but she called as a concerned friend. I've heard something's happened. I just want to know if I can help. And in fact, investigators were like, yeah, I think you can. When they investigated the crime scene, this is why they thought Jodi could help, they found two things that became very key early on in the investigation. One of those was a camera that was in the wash. I don't know if you guys recall this, but she threw the camera into the washing machine, maybe thinking that this would erase anything, but they had a computer forensics expert who was able to retrieve that memory card. And what they found was a couple sets of photos. And these photos, some of them were, sort of sexual in nature, that Jodi and Travis had taken the day really of his murder. And they showed the timestamp indicating that Jodi Arias was in fact there exactly when she said she wasn't and had already lied to the police. They also showed, and I would ask Amy and Jillian, do you guys remember, this was rough, but they also showed a couple of photos of Jodi dragging Travis. Do you recall these photos? Because I was very surprised and very haunted by that.
Yeah. I think there was one photo, Jillian, maybe you recall differently. If I recall, there was one photo that showed someone's foot and they said Jodi owned those pants.
Yeah, it was her sweatpants. Juan Martinez at trial had said that was Jodi's pant leg as she was dragging Travis's body. So.
Clearly not a picture that she intended to take.
No. So what emerged was, a theory that while she was doing some of this stuff, the camera fell and it accidentally took a couple of these photos that showed Travis and his body being moved. And they're very disturbing, obviously. And so police interviewed Jodi and they confronted her with this evidence. Do you guys remember this interrogation that was sort of off the wall? Jodi's doing handstands. She's, singing. And the police brought these photos out and they show her. And do you guys recall what her response was? Does either of you remember?
Say that looks like me or something.
Well, she goes, well, that looks like me, but I wasn't there. And they're kind of like, well, this is really you. And also we found, the second thing they had found was the palm print, a bloody palm print on the wall. And it was a mixture of Jodi and Travis's blood. So there was really no getting out of that one. Jodi was she was apprehended pretty quickly. The police arrested her on July 15th, 2008. And she was not immediately, but she was eventually extradited from California back to Arizona, where she pled not guilty and was held in a local jail. During that time, she gives a number of interviews. Do you all remember the new Jailhouse Interviews?
Oh, yeah. Inside Edition, I believe, was one of them. Yeah.
And her first story in the police station was that she wasn't there, right? It's not me. In the Jailhouse Interviews, her story changes for the second time. The new story was I think it was called the Ninja Theory. And this was where she said, okay, I'm going to tell you the truth, that I was there with Travis. 2 masked intruders came in. I know one was a male, one was a female. They killed Travis and they told me not to ever say anything because they would kill me. So that's story number 2. She said, I just didn't tell them because I didn't say anything because I was so terrified and they spared my life. Version 3 of what happened, a totally new story, would emerge later on at Jodi's trial. And so to cover some of the trial information, Jillian, I think I'm going to turn it over to you right now.
Yeah, so the trial started in December of 2012. And I don't know about you guys, but it lasted for 4 months. And that is just not a number I remember. I remember watching it and thinking that it was going on forever, but 4 months went on for.
Long trial. I watched every bit of it. I think I told you this, Jillian. I would record it when I went to work, come home, watch it as late all night if I had to. I just had to watch.
Yeah, I actually, I was working a day job at the time in marketing, and I remember sitting in my office and just having the trial live streaming and having my headphones in and kind of pretending I was working, but really I was watching the trial. So yeah, it was just, but for 4 months, I was looking back on that. It kind of surprised me.
Yeah.
But so if convicted, she would be facing the death penalty.
Mm-hmm.
And this, it wasn't one of those trials where you're presented with an alternative suspect. Like, this was a case where you knew who did it. Because as you said, Jodi, in this last version, admitted that she was there and that she killed Travis. Mm-hmm. And now the whole trial would be about intent. So did Jodi intend on murdering Travis, or was it, as she claimed, which was, she says it was self-defense? So the prosecutor in the case—
That was a surprise, right, Jillian? Was that a surprise when she claimed self-defense all of a sudden at trial?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, I don't remember exactly if it had, been leaked in the media that was going to be her defense, or the pretrial hearings. Honestly, I don't remember what that was. But I believe it was a surprise.
Yeah, they were grasping at straws. They didn't know what else to do. They knew it had to be an affirmative defense, but they didn't know what the story would be. So that really only leaves self-defense, right?
Right.
I mean, there was so much evidence to prove that she was at the scene, to prove that she was the one who did it. There was like a palm print, a hand, a shoe print, those photos. And so there was a lot of damning evidence against her that she was there. So the trial focused more so on, I'm not going to get into all of the evidence that showed that she was the one who killed him, because she admitted that.
Right.
But I did go through and I kind of pulled out pieces of evidence that they presented that I thought showed intent, or, how she behaved afterwards. So the prosecution's theory was that Jodi was obsessed with Travis. She was stalking him and was essentially angry with him for not committing to her and for planning to go on a trip with someone else. As you said, he was planning on leaving the very next day to go on a trip with a female friend of his. They say she stole a gun from her parents' house, rented a car, and brought gas cans with her so that she wouldn't have to stop for gas on the way to Travis's house. Mm-hmm. She then stabbed him while he was in the shower, dragged him into his bedroom and slit his throat, and then dragged him back to the bathroom, where she then shot him in the head. So that's the prosecution's theory of what they say happened. And then afterwards, they said she went to go see another guy that she was seeing, so that she would have an alibi for what she had done. So as you said already, the crime was very graphic. Blood was everywhere. The medical examiner estimated that the gunshot wound to Travis's head came last, so likely after Travis was already dead. And one of the things he said was that if Travis had been shot first, he wouldn't have been able to fight back, and he did have cuts on his hands and on his arms that were indicative of defensive wounds. Right. However, he couldn't confirm it with 100% certainty, since the body was already decomposing when it was found 5 days later. The reason why that is important testimony for the prosecution is because if they could show that Travis was shot last, that could count as heinous and depraved murder, which could go for the death penalty. And it would also, blow Jodi's, story of self-defense out of the water, which we'll hear later. So we already talked about those deleted photos that were found on the camera in Travis's washing machine. They also called a man named Ryan Burns to the stand. And Ryan was a man that Jodi was romantically involved with, and a man who Jodi went to visit in Utah the day after Travis's murder. So this was all part of her road trip that she had embarked on. It was a planned visit, but according to Ryan, she was a day late in getting to his house and told him that she had just gotten lost. She didn't say anything about having been at Travis's house and certainly nothing about killing him. Ryan said Jodi didn't seem upset at all. And in fact, they spent the afternoon together, went out with some of his friends, they made out, took a nap. There were a few strange things he said that he noticed. One, she was pulled over while in Utah for having her rear license plate upside down.
Oh,
And, did you remember that?
yes, I just did now. Yeah.
Yeah. And she also had cuts on her hands that he saw as well, which she, told him a story about how she cut it while she was at work at a restaurant that she didn't even work at, but that's kind of neither here nor there.
Yeah.
Ryan also recounted for the jury that there was a time when Jodi had messaged him and told him that she had checked Travis's text messages while he was sleeping, and that she had actually responded to one of the text messages from a girl, and then she deleted it and never told Travis about it. So I think the prosecution was kind of trying to show that Jodi was definitely, interested in what Travis was doing and whether he was talking to other females, which would go towards motive. Another friend of Jodi's who also lived in Utah and who saw Jodi that next day after the murder said that she had a long talk with Jodi about Jodi's relationship with Travis. She said Jodi told her that, she and Travis weren't together anymore, but that they would always be friends. And she said Jodi then called her a few days later and was in tears when, she told her that Travis had been killed. And in that phone call, Jodi told her that Travis was such a wonderful person and she could not imagine who would want to do that to him. So also, as you said, Megan, in the trial, they introduced Jodi's own words against her. So how she had lied to investigators with her different versions of what had happened. At one point, she had even told the detective, if I killed Travis, I would beg for the death penalty. I don't know if you guys remember that.
I was waiting to hear if you were going to bring that out, because if not, I was just going to have to get it out there. Yeah, I remember that. I would beg for, I remember the emphatic way that she said it,
Yes, definitely. And then, of course, in that Inside Edition interview, she said, no jury will convict me.
Mark my words.
Yes. And that was back when she was saying that 2 intruders had come in and killed Travis and she escaped. So Jodi rented a car, and the prosecution, was able to prove that she rented the car the day before she killed Travis, and that she rented it about 90 miles from where she lived, and she lived in Wairika.
Right.
And if you're wondering if there were rental car places in Wairika, the detective said, yes, there are 2. And the owner of the rental car agency testified that Jodi specifically requested a car that was not loud in color and that she did not want a red one that he had offered to her. Prosecution also presented evidence about a missing gun, a .25 caliber gun, the same one that they said was used in Travis's murder, was actually stolen from Jodi's grandparents' house a week prior to the murder, and the murder weapon was never found. And they also introduced receipts, and not in that, slang way, actual receipts.
Right.
She had purchased 10 gallons of gas from one gas station the night before she left. And 10 minutes later, she purchased another 10 gallons. And then they showed that she actually purchased a 3rd gas can. And again, that was so that she could drive through Arizona without the need to purchase gas.
Her ex-boyfriend testified that he gave her 2 gas cans also.
Yes. Yep. And I'm going to get into that. So so the defense's case, her attorneys were Kirk Nurmi and Jennifer Wilmot. And it's so funny, like kind of looking back at all of these people. I mean, it was such a high profile case that like, I haven't thought about this case in so long. And even just kind of knowing, like hearing those names, I can picture exactly what they look like in the courtroom.
Me too.
Yeah.
Even though Kirk Nurmi doesn't look like that anymore.
Yeah, that's true. But you have an update for that later. So Jodi's defense was that she was in an abusive relationship and that she killed Travis in self-defense after he lunged at her. Her attorneys called Travis a sexual deviant, and in order to help bolster their self-defense claim, they went into what they implied were dark parts of Travis's character. So in other words, they wanted to call witnesses to the stand and they wanted to try and paint him as a bad guy. And I don't know if you guys remember just how brutal the defense was towards, Travis's character in this case. It was something that I remember being surprised by and, disgusted by, honestly. So one of the witnesses was, as you said, Amy, Jodi's ex-boyfriend, Daryl Brewer. They dated for 4 years, lived together for 2. He said Jodi was never jealous with him and certainly never violent. After they broke up, they kept in touch. And then in June 2008, he said, and this was just days before the murder, he said Jodi came over asking to borrow 2 gas cans. Now, Travis's ex-girlfriend, Lisa, testified. She said that she and Travis dated for about 7 months, and she broke up with him after she found out that he had been cheating on her with Jodi. She said she thought that Travis was a virgin and was saving himself for marriage, and after she died, she was shocked to find out that he wasn't a virgin and that he had been lying to her. Now, emails that she had sent to Travis where she was angry with him after finding out that he had cheated on her were read to the jury, and you guys will, I think, definitely remember this part, but during cross-examination, prosecutor Juan Martinez is questioning her about that email, and he suddenly shows Lisa in the entire courtroom this photo of Travis on the autopsy table with his throat slit.
Yeah.
And Martinez basically says, do you think that even with everything they claim he put you through, it's appropriate to slash someone's throat like this? And it was just this shocking moment, and some of Travis's family members got up and ran out of the room, and I believe Jodi was also crying at the defense table. There was an objection by the defense, and then a short recess was called. It was like this very dramatic moment. Right. And they had, so one of Travis's friends testified that Travis kept Jodi from their Mormon group of friends. He said Travis never told him that he and Jodi were sexually active, and that in fact Travis was a church elder at their Mormon church, which meant that he was banned from having any sexual relations outside of the marriage. So obviously they were trying to show that Travis was kind of living 2 lives and keeping Jodi as his dirty little secrets.
That became the theme, the dirty little secret, and they really denigrated his character.
They really did.
So, and you were just, you couldn't help, I couldn't help, but when these things started coming out, I really felt for his family on that.
Oh my God, I can't even imagine. I mean, just having to be there in the first place and then to sit there and listen to all of these things. I mean, and it gets worse, obviously. I'm sure you guys will remember. Do you remember how long Jodi testified for? Like how many days?
17 or 18.
I was going to say 16.
Yeah, it was 18 days. And I believe it was about 5 days until she even addressed the murders, aside from like the first, question when Nermi asked her if she had did it.
Gotta be a record for how long someone's ever testified. I mean, that has to be a record.
Yeah, I mean, that's interesting. I kind of want to look that up now.
Yeah, me too.
But yeah, so she testified and talked for days about herself, her upbringing, her relationship with Travis. She said she was abused by her parents growing up. She said she was also essentially abused by her ex-boyfriends. She detailed getting into an argument with one after she found out that he was emailing another woman, and he tried to strangle her and threatened to kill her family. And she said she stayed with him because she was in love. She described other relationships and how she would convert to their religions and essentially, do what they wanted. Now, regarding her relationship with Travis, she said he belittled her, he cheated on her, he used her for sex, that she felt like a prostitute or a doormat. She said one time she even woke up to him having sex with her without her consent. She said his abuse eventually turned physical, and he pushed her down on the ground and kicked her, breaking her finger during one incident. She also claimed that he choked her at one point. And now, while on the stand, Jodi absolutely just trashed Travis. She told the jury that in January 2008, so just 6 months before he died, she walked in on him masturbating to photographs of young boys. And she said he admitted that he was attracted to young boys. And she said he even bought her a pair of Superman underwear to wear because of that attraction. Now, there was no corroborating evidence of this.
None.
Whatsoever. No photos were found on his computer ever. There was no evidence that he had deleted any photos like that off of his computer. And as it would come out later, she had actually told one expert that the images were on Travis's computer and another one that they were printed out photos. So yeah, that was pretty shocking testimony. I don't know about you guys. I was pretty surprised that that even was allowed in, given that there was no corroborating evidence to that.
I was shocked that it was allowed in, shocked that that was an allegation. Like, I think all around, every single person watching or sitting in the courtroom was shocked when that came out.
Family. His family was just blindsided by that.
Oh,
Right.
Completely, yeah.
And now regarding the murder, she said she did go over to Travis's house. She admitted to being there. They were intimate with each other. And then she said she was taking photos of him in the shower when she dropped his new camera. And she said he became enraged and then tried to attack her. He allegedly lunged at her and slammed her onto the floor, screaming at her. She described running to his closet and grabbing a gun from his shelf. She said that Travis chased after her and that he basically tackled her as she shot the gun. She said she didn't mean to shoot the gun, but that it went off. She said she thought that would stop him, but that he kept coming. She described him grabbing at her and screaming, "Fucking kill you, bitch." Sorry about the language.
Right.
She said she then has no memory after that. So she said she has no memory of stabbing him. And there's a huge gap in her memory. And then she just remembers driving in the desert afterwards.
The fog, right?
The fog, yes. So she said she threw the gun she had used out of her car window, washed her hands with some water that she had in the car, left Travis a voicemail, to kind of throw police off. And then she drove off to meet Ryan Burns in Utah. And she also claimed that she didn't bring any weapons with her when she went to meet Travis. So she said she lied about her involvement because she was ashamed of what happened and scared. She said she also had plans to commit suicide. And she said she was extremely confident that no jury would convict her, as she said, because she was planning on killing herself, and therefore there wouldn't be a trial and there wouldn't be a jury to convict her. So to me, it almost seemed like she had an answer for everything. You know what I mean? Like
Absolutely.
every kind of, So one part we all probably remember is the cross-examination that also went on for days and days. And prosecutor Juan Martinez was very aggressive in his cross-examination with her and confronted her about everything from the gap in her memory to secret coded messages that she had been trying to send to witnesses while in jail. He had her get up and reenact how Travis supposedly lunged at her. It was incredibly fascinating testimony, in my opinion. So now there was a lot of testimony about Jodi's mental state, and I am no expert in that field. So I'm going to let Amy talk more about that in just a minute. But the jury deliberated, came back with a guilty verdict. The trial then moved on to the penalty phase, where the jury recommended that she spend life in prison, and that is where she is today. So Amy, if you want to take over and talk about Jodi's mental state.
So you set that up really well. It was so hard for me not to jump in, and because a lot of the things you said, it just supports a lot of what I'm going to talk about. So the mental health portion of the trial was extremely memorable. You mentioned it. There were several mental health professionals, and they had varying diagnoses, which was the most interesting part about it. So first we have her defense psychologist, who explained that Jodi had acute stress at the time of the murder. And she went on to say that her body was sent into a fight or flight mode, and that's why she lost her memory. This expert also diagnosed Jodi with PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, although as similar to other things in the trial, there was zero corroborating evidence or support for this. The defense then presented a psychotherapist that concluded that Jodi was a victim of domestic abuse. Again, no evidence to support this other than Jodi's own words. So the prosecution's expert was a psychologist who testified that there was no evidence of abuse, no evidence of PTSD, and no evidence of amnesia. The expert went on to say that the memory loss that Jodi described was not consistent with amnesia. So she was malingering, it seemed like. So that's when someone pretends, or that's when someone feigns a mental disorder and they do it incorrectly. And so experts know, they can see through that sort of thing. So the prosecution expert decided that Jodi had borderline personality disorder and that Jodi was just terrified of being abandoned. And she could not handle the fact that she was losing Travis. Remember, Travis had this trip planned with this other woman, so he was slipping away from her. The defense then called another psychologist, and this psychologist refuted that claim, stating that Jodi did not have borderline personality. However, she did have an anxiety disorder, and that anxiety disorder stemmed from trauma. So if you recall, Jodi said she had a traumatic childhood, and so they were trying to, go off of that. So let's unpack this a little bit, because there's a lot here. I just glossed over everything, but I really want to get into it now. So I want to start by talking a little bit about the intersection of mental health and the law. Okay. So the DSM, which we know is the Diagnostic Manual of Mental Disorders, and I guess you could say it's the authority on mental health diagnoses. The problem is that it was written to diagnose and treat individuals with a mental illness. It was not ever intended to explain criminal behavior.
Right.
But as we often see, it's used to explain criminal behavior, and that's a slippery slope, and that can be dangerous because we know that people who have mental illnesses are not always violent and not always criminal. So unfortunately, it starts to paint this picture that leads to the stigmatization of people with mental health issues. Okay, so I think in this case, and we'll talk about this a little more, but I think sometimes it's hard for us to grasp that sometimes there might not be an explanation. Sometimes people just do really evil, bad things. And I think it helps us feel better to try to understand, to always put a label, to understand, well, they did this because they have this, but sometimes it's not always that simple. And I think in Jodi's situation, it's a case where it's not that clear cut. So the other thing I want to talk about before we actually get into the different personality disorders and what Jodi may or may not have, I want to also note that the experts that testified, they were hired. Okay, so when experts are hired to testify in the court, they are hired by either the prosecution or the defense, and they are being paid for their testimony. So it's really hard to say that this is objective. Okay, I'm not suggesting that experts are lying. What I am suggesting is that, especially when it comes to mental health diagnoses, things could be a bit subjective. So people can explain a story in a way that fits a certain diagnosis. Okay.
And there's an incentive bias that can't be helped.
Of course. And, we can't blame people for that, right? People are paying experts for their testimony, and I think experts should be paid, but I don't think it's fair that there is this I think there's a misconception, or at least it's portrayed that they are unbiased.
Yeah.
And I don't think that's fair because they are not objective. They simply can't be. So what do we think? Does Jodi have borderline personality disorder? Well, before I get into the actual diagnostic criteria for that personality disorder, I do want to say, number one, I am not a licensed psychologist. I do have a master's in forensic psychology, but that does not make me an expert. So even if I was, though, I never personally assessed Jodi. So it's important that when people give their opinion, even people that are licensed professionals, without actually being the one to speak to an individual, we're only left with what we see in the trial, or what we read about in the trial transcripts, and what we hear about from other people. So we need to keep that in mind. But either way, let's go into the diagnostic criteria for borderline, and let's see if it fits. Okay, so there's 9 diagnostic criteria. It's going to be we're playing a little game here, okay? I'm going to go through each one, and I want to know, do we think yay or nay if she fits this, okay?
I'm ready.
So in order to be diagnosed, via the DSM, you have to have 5 out of 9 of these. Okay?
Right.
I'm going to go through them a little quickly because there's many other personality disorders to get to tonight. So first one, frantic efforts to avoid abandonment. I want to give my opinion first on this because I want to say that is a hard yes. She shows up uninvited. She recorded conversation. She stole Travis's phone, hacked into his account. Right? Do you ladies agree that she shows frantic efforts to avoid abandonment?
Yes.
Yeah, seems that way.
That's one. You guys keeping count here? Okay, number 2, unstable relationships. I'm going to say this one's not met. I want to hear.
This one's not met.
I don't. Do you think Jodi has a history of unstable relationships based on?
I think it would be hard to judge. I agree with what you're saying because she actually had some long-term relationships. So this one would be hard either way, but she certainly had a very unstable relationship with her victim.
And if you go off of, Jodi's own words in her testimony, she did describe being in prior relationships, where she said that they abused her also, and that she would, you know, conform to kind of whatever they wanted her to be. So I guess you would have to take her word for it. And I don't know if that counts, but.
Yeah, no. So I'm glad you said that, because the next one is identity disturbance. Okay, so Jodi was quite the chameleon. So I think you're right, Jillian. I think that, so I personally, if I had to pick, I'd say there's not a strong history of unstable relationships because we don't know enough.
Yeah.
But I think it leads us straight into identity disturbance.
Agreed.
She converted, she moved. She was a Mormon after dating Travis for how long? I don't know if we even touched on that Jodi converted.
Converted to Mormonism it was only after a couple months, because they only dated for 5 or 6 months, or it was 5 or 7 months. I can't remember.
And I read somewhere that she had dipped her toe in Buddhism and some other religions after dating other people as well.
Yeah.
So I think that's a strong yes for me.
That one.
So we have 2. Okay, the next one, impulsivity that is damaging.
Yes.
Yeah, I think the murder would fall under this category, right? So
I think a lot of her previous actions do, the impulsiveness in which she would get in the car and go, or, you know, try to get into his house, slash his tires. I think, yeah.
The prosecution, though, if you recall, the prosecution was trying to claim, and I think actually they stand by this, that they believe it was premeditated. I don't believe that they were able to.
Yeah.
I don't think they were, from what I know of the evidence, again, I wasn't there, right? From what I've read and from what I understand, I don't think there's enough to say whether or not it was premeditated.
You mean the crime?
The crime.
Oh, disagree on that, but
Yeah, I disagree with you as well.
You did. Okay.
Yeah, I think there's strong evidence of premeditation, but I think she had a lot of previous behavior that would fit with impulsivity.
Okay, and the reason why I'm not 100% on the premeditation is because there's no hard evidence that is connecting her to, yes, her grandparents' home was robbed. That's very strong circumstantial evidence, but it's not that they have any hard proof on that. But we can move on because we could go in circles with that. Suicidal behavior.
Suicidal?
Suicidal behavior.
I don't think she was suicidal.
No. I think
Ever.
I think she threatened suicide, but I think that was more to get attention. Would you guys agree? Do you think she was suicidal?
Great.
Yeah, that's what it seemed like, yeah.
Okay, so she was more just attention seeking when she would, threaten suicide. Affective instability. So that's affect, right? Affective. Sorry if I said effective, but it's affective, right? So that means that she's not stable when it comes to her emotions.
Yes.
That one's pretty clear, right?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. The next one, chronic feelings of emptiness. Again, we're not in her head.
That one I wouldn't be able to say. I couldn't say yes or no on that one. I don't know.
The problem with this is we rely on the self-report of the person being assessed.
Right.
So it's a little tricky because if you're manipulative and if you're perhaps a sociopath, which we'll get to in a moment, then you're going to lie and manipulate the people that are giving you the assessment, right? So it's really, it becomes a little tricky to know what you're actually getting. Because sure, Jodi could have told her therapist that she always feels sad and empty, but what does that really mean? Intense anger and difficulty controlling anger.
Yes.
If you kill someone, I think you probably are always going to fall into that category. Do you agree with that?
That's fair.
Last one, paranoid ideation.
I could see that some evidence of that probably based on things that I had heard her say in statements and her always being worried about. I remember there were statements from Travis's friends that she was always worried about what they were saying about her. Yeah. I mean, I wouldn't say 100%, but I lean more towards, on that one.
It's hard to say because, so she did say that she felt that many people were against her, but also, there was some of those behaviors, like she would listen in at the door to friends' conversations when Travis was in the room. Right. Well, when we think about the diagnosis and I guess the criteria of paranoid ideation, you typically think more along the terms of schizoaffective or schizophrenic. Right?
I would, yeah, probably.
So I think we're in agreement here that she does not, even though you only need 5 of 9, I think at most there's 4 here, and that's even a little bit of a stretch. So
I counted like 5 or 6. Where am I at?
I don't know. You're wrong. No, I'm just kidding.
Well, I can't count. I mean,
so there were a few that we didn't agree on. But I think even if we were to, you know, what is it called when you even if we were to even the score, I think we're still at 5, max 6. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and say, based on what we know, I am not convinced that Jodi had borderline personality disorder. However, that is in the same cluster as another personality disorder. It might be a little more fitting. Any ideas?
Antisocial,
Close.
narcissistic.
Narcissistic. Okay. So what is narcissistic personality disorder? I'll go through these a little quicker because I want to have time for questions.
Yeah.
But I want to, then I want to tell you what I actually think, and I want to hear what you think. But so for narcissistic personality disorder, you have a grandiose sense of self-importance, which pretty much means you think you're better and smarter and more deserving than everyone in the room.
And that the world revolves around your existence.
Exactly. You guys, I don't think we even need to talk about that one. That's pretty clear that Jodi has.
I think that hands down she has narcissistic personality disorder.
Fantasy about wealth, power, and success. You can't say, but I think there was a little bit of a power thing with Jodi.
Mm-hmm.
Believing yourself to be special and unique. Again, I think that's a clear one. Requiring excessive admiration. I mean, I think
so too. Yeah.
I mean, if you recall, she wanted to represent herself during
I remember that. Yeah. The judge denied that request, if I recall.
She also, do you recall that she was trying to sell t-shirts to the jury to raise money for domestic violence?
I sure do.
Was it to the jury?
It wasn't to the jury.
Well, no, she wasn't trying to sell them to the jury, but she brought out the t-shirt.
She showed them, like, this is what she's going to do. Right. Yeah.
She wasn't necessarily trying to sell them to them, but she wasn't not trying to sell them. Like, she was like, this is for domestic violence.
Yeah.
That's ridiculous. So she craved the spotlight. That's clear. Sense of entitlement, absolutely. Manipulative, exploiting other people. Obviously, she played the victim time and time again. I think she manipulated the jury by, the jury being hung the first time and, her life being spared as a result. Because remember, it was a death penalty case, but they could not unanimously get to that. Lack of empathy, very clear. She shows zero remorse. I do believe she says that she has some regrets based on what she did after. Correct me if I'm wrong. I don't think she's ever said she regrets killing him.
She's never said that.
I don't believe I remember that. Yeah.
If she said that, I missed that. I don't believe she showed any remorse, to be honest, but.
Yeah. And then the last two, jealousy. We saw the stalking behavior, hacking the Facebook, listening to the calls, and then arrogance. So I think Jodi more so fits into narcissistic personality disorder, more so than borderline, but I'm still not positive, okay? So I want to say, if you look at her behavior during incarceration, have you guys looked at all about what her behavior is since she's been incarcerated? Because that's interesting and lends itself to some of these criteria as well.
Such as what, Amy?
So she sells her drawings online.
That I know, yes.
She has fans and she brags about her fans. She corresponds. She does video chats with a lot of her fans and she brags about how she has so many of them.
She's allowed to do video chats?
No, can I ask a question real quick?
Yeah.
This might be a dumb question, but
no questions.
Can someone be both?
Both.
Borderline personality disorder and yeah. Okay.
Absolutely.
So do you think it's a possibility that she is both, or you are just in the narcissistic?
I mean, based on what we talked about, I think she's more towards narcissistic, but I actually think that we can also talk a little bit about psychopathy and sociopathology. Yeah, so there was a lot of pathological lying, right? Lots of evidence she claimed existed that never existed because she was never able to corroborate. There was never any proof. She changed her story several times. And again, she never said she regretted murdering Travis. So my final opinion, I would say, is I don't believe she killed Travis because she was narcissistic, but I do believe that she exhibits several traits that are associated with one who is narcissistic. She also has many traits that are associated with antisocial personality disorder and sociopathology.
Right.
Megan, I want you to talk a little bit about that. Before I have you talk about that, I just want to say it's a continuum. So when we talk about sociopaths and psychopaths, it's not just black or white. There's a lot of gray area in between. So someone could be higher on the scale or lower on the scale. The last thing I want to say is from what I've read, there's no evidence that Jodi had any types of these behaviors prior to the age of 15. And Megan, correct me if I'm wrong, but one of the criteria to be diagnosed as either a psychopath or sociopath is that there has to be some evidence of, like conduct disorder that we always talk about in our classes, right? There has to be some sort of evidence that these traits were apparent prior to the age of 15. So let's
15,
hear it.
I'm not sure if it's 15. It's like right around there, like 15, 16, like at a certain point. So I don't know that much about her background, but I can tell you, usually the diagnosis of psychopathy or sociopathology is done by the Hare scales. It's like the PCLR. It's a 40-point scale, and it diagnoses various dimensions. It's like a checklist you go through, and for each dimension, there's a number of questions that are used to diagnose it. So there's like, if people are curious and they want to look it up, you could look up like the Hare cheat sheet.
Hare, H-A-R-E.
Yes, sorry, Hare, H-A-R-E. So the criteria, I obviously won't go through all 40, but I can tell you that offhand, I think Jodi meets a lot of these. She would score on a lot of them. So lack of empathy for others, lack of sympathy, superficial charm, impulsiveness, short temper.
They didn't bring up psychopathy at all during trial, did they? Any of the psychologists?
I don't know offhand. I don't recall.
Okay.
I don't remember that either. I don't know if they said she had antisocial traits. I don't think they did, but I'm not positive, so don't hold me to that one. But that was like 6 of them. Let's see. Oh, parasitic lifestyle. Promiscuity, I don't know that I would be able to judge her on that or not. I really don't know what her I wouldn't even want to be honest, but I'm not sure enough that I know about that one. Manipulativeness. When I go through the Hare scale.
Isn't there one that's like failure to conform to social norms or failure to adapt to social norms? So it's,
I don't know if that's exactly, but.
Yeah, so it's people that they kind of go to the beat of their own drum, which I think you could say Jodi did. She kind of just like did what she wanted. Like she didn't really have any care about.
So psychopathy is usually like right at the very end of the scale, and usually people say like antisocial now. So would I say that Jodi is an antisocial? Yes. Sometimes when people say, well, she exhibits some traits of it, I think she actually exhibits a lot of traits of an antisocial. That would be, just so you know, my opinion. But I also think she meets the criteria for narcissistic personality and borderline personality.
Yeah. All right. Jillian, do you have anything you want to add to that before we get into the other juicy stuff?
No, I am not the expert on that, so I would not feel comfortable adding anything to there, but I find the whole conversation very fascinating, though.
Well, thank you, Amy. Are you finished covering the mental health stuff?
I'm never finished. I could keep going, but
we can keep going all night, clearly. But
for the sake of time, yes, I am complete.
That was really a great analysis. Thank you. I think we're going back to Jillian now. Jillian, I don't know. Are you going to take us into the appeal, or are you just going into Juan Martinez updates?
Well, they're connected.
Oh, they're connected. Sorry. So I'm going to turn over to Jillian. I guess, this was all the stuff that we kind of knew, but now we're actually getting into the updates. So
yeah,
take it away, Jillian.
And I have to be honest, so before I get started, what was your opinions about Juan Martinez, like in the trial? Were you rooting for him? Did you think he did a good job? Do you think his behavior was a little questionable? What were your thoughts?
Amy, or you?
Yeah.
I'm just going to say very briefly, I thought he was a very zealous prosecutor at the beginning. And as things went on, my opinion of him just kept going down.
Yeah. I was, of course, I was rooting for him just because I was rooting for or against Jodi, right? I wanted to see him win. I was also rooting for him for a long time, not necessarily because of him, but I wanted all those lies exposed. He pushed really hard. It's the most contentious cross I've ever seen before. And I think he went too far. I think some of his tactics were, not, but I couldn't help but root for him because I wanted to see him expose every single one of her lies. And so in that way, I was happy with some of the outcome, but I wouldn't say I was thrilled with all of his actions.
Yeah, fair. So for me, I feel as though in the beginning of the trial, when he was cross-examining, some of the witnesses, or when he was actually on direct with some of his own witnesses, I felt like he was even very harsh with them.
Yes.
But by the time it got to Jodi's cross-examination, I was already feeling so horrible for Travis's family and everything that she said about him and all these accusations, that by that time I was excited for
Right.
Juan to expose
Right.
Jodi.
Right.
And so I remember I was just like, oh, bring it on. Please don't let her get away with saying all these things and, not being confronted on them. So I really, not enjoyed, but I really, found that fascinating.
Right.
In hindsight, there were definitely, when he was when he was cross-examining, the defense experts, I did think he was way harsh, and he would bring up things that I thought were not really relevant or accurate. But either way, overall, once the trial ended, I was happy with the verdict. I know we'll get into that later, but, and I was like, okay, Juan got the job done. Okay. And then in researching or in looking into everything since then, I would see headlines here and there about, this complaint was filed against him and this one, but I never really looked into it. And I have to say I was very surprised. And I don't know, a lot of people who followed this may not be, but so I'll start with this past October 2019. Jodi's conviction, it was threatened to be overturned after allegations of prosecutorial misconduct made their way to the Arizona Court of Appeals. So Jodi's attorney this time, an attorney named Corey Engel, argued in front of a 3-judge panel that Jodi did not get a fair trial and that her conviction should be reversed. And she basically, her main reason for this was because she said that the prosecutor, Juan Martinez, engaged in, quote, pronounced and persistent misconduct, which permeated all stages of the trial. Now, she also argued that the judge, failed to control, the news coverage of the case and the circus-like atmosphere, but mostly it was about Juan Martinez.
When you say that, are you going to give us any examples that permeated,
Yes.
Okay.
She argued in front of the judges that Juan Martinez had a theme that he used throughout the trial, and that was that no one can be trusted except for him. And she said that he made every one of the defense experts out to be a person who had a relationship with Jodi, or who had been hiding evidence, or who had changed evidence based on their feelings for her. So Dr. Richard Samuel was one of the defense experts, and he was one of the experts who argued that Jodi had PTSD. And during the cross-examination, Prosecutor Martinez, brought up the fact that he had purchased a self-help book for Jodi. And he basically brought that up and, said that was blurring the lines of their relationship, and then accused Dr. Samuels of having feelings for Jodi. Almost
I remember that.
Yeah, almost like implying that there was a relationship there.
That was icky. That was icky.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely at the time it was I don't know what that has to do with anything, but okay. So she brought that example up, and he basically said the same thing about the domestic violence expert as well, and basically accusing them of feeling bad for Jodi and almost of lying because they felt bad for Jodi, or they felt a certain way for Jodi.
Got it.
So her attorney said that, he alleged that the defense was basically fabricating their entire case. So the state, however, argued that there's overwhelming evidence of guilt, which I think we all agree on, and that the conviction should not be overturned due to prosecutorial misconduct. They said that Jodi got a fair trial and that nothing Juan Martinez did, as far as missteps go, impacted the jury. Now, it was interesting because at one point, one of the judges asked the attorney for the state whether or not he agreed that there were prosecutorial, misconduct, that there was prosecutorial misconduct in the case. And the prosecutor arguing for the state actually acknowledged that, yes, there were some instances of improper conduct, he said, but it didn't affect the outcome of the case. So the Arizona court...
Harmless error, that's what I always hear. It's like, oh yeah, there was some, but it was harmless.
Yeah, I mean, you know, because I was listening to this, I think I told you guys, I was listening to this hearing as I was driving on my way home from somewhere. So I just remember like listening to the arguments and one being fearful that, you know, Jodi was going to get, you know, a new trial due to this, or that it was going to be thrown out. And, you know, also just kind of being like, wow, yeah, that was kind of shitty of what he did, you know, and
Right.
you know, hoping that it wasn't going to affect the whole case. But the Arizona Court of Appeals agreed with the prosecution, and they ended up upholding Jodi's murder conviction and life sentence. However, they did write in their ruling that they believed that the prosecutor did engage in misconduct by being hostile and aggressive with each witness whose testimony was inconsistent with the state's theory of the case. And they also found that the defense just failed to show that the publicity surrounding the trial affected the jury. And now, speaking of misconduct complaints against Juan Martinez, so that's not all that he's been accused
Right.
of since the trial. He's actually had numerous complaints filed against him. And in March of 2019, there was a formal misconduct complaint filed against him from the State Bar of Arizona. And the complaint is actually up on AZ Central's website, and it is wild. It
Wow.
alleges, it's crazy. It alleges that, quote, Martinez had flirtatious or sexual relationships with a blogger during the Arias trial, and that he tried to get her to get information about one of the jurors. One of the court reporters also accused him of making inappropriate comments about her. She said that during hearings for the Arias case, Martinez would stare at her and commented on her appearance. Among the comments was, "I would like to see what's inside that skirt." And then after the trial, and I guess she like even changed her schedule because she was so uncomfortable by all the things he was saying to her.
Wow.
After the trial, he told her, "I really miss those skirts." He's also accused of talking to jury members directly. And according to AZ Central, and this is just according to the document, quote, documents state he had a sexual relationship with a juror who had been let go that included sending her unsolicited nude photographs.
I have not heard about this. I mean, I heard there were some allegations, but I haven't heard the specifics.
Yeah, and I mean, obviously, I don't know. You know, these are just the allegations.
Well, they're allegations right now, and so let's be clear about that for sure.
Absolutely. He's also accused of sexually harassing women at his work, that he, quote, looked at female employees' chests and blatantly looked them up and down as they walked away, which resulted in some of the female law clerks ducking into cubicles or engaging in busy work just to avoid him. So in light of these allegations and others, in February of this year, Juan Martinez was at first placed on paid administrative leave.
Right.
And then a month later, he was outright fired from his job as a prosecutor. And he's now appealing that because he says that he was reprimanded already for those behaviors, and he completed a recommended sexual harassment training session. And so he should be reinstated as a prosecutor. But I did not know about that. What do you guys think?
I didn't know about all this. I'm really glad I knew that so relieved that Jodi's conviction was upheld. I remember hearing about it being in danger because of this, and I thought, oh gosh, you always think about the family too.
Right.
I did hear about some of the sexual allegations, but I don't know enough about it to know how strong the evidence was and how many people came forward. And I would imagine if they did an internal investigation and it was really thorough and it really found conclusive proof that a firing is appropriate, but I don't know if that happened. So I would probably reserve a little bit of judgment on that one. Amy?
I don't have anything more to add. As usual, I pretty much just agree with Megan's assessment on that one. The only comment I want to make is, did I hear you correctly that you said they wanted him to take some sort of course?
He already did.
Behavior?
Yeah, apparently, and that's why he's appealing his firing, because he's saying it's almost like double jeopardy. He's saying, okay, you guys already, accused me of doing this. I was already reprimanded. He got a written reprimand. I, took this, what was it, the sexual harassment course, a training session. And so he's saying that he was fired after that. And so he, shouldn't have been fired.
Gotcha. Okay.
Well, was that much earlier on then? He's saying, so these allegations were made much earlier. He did this. And then they brought they're using the same exact allegations to justify his firing?
It seems that way. But there's a lot of allegations from a lot of, the complaint from the Arizona bar basically said that they interviewed over 30 employees of
I'm just going to stand by what I said. If they did a strong investigation and found conclusive proof, then I would think a firing is appropriate.
Yeah. And what are your guys' thoughts about how it would affect Jodi's appeals then? Do you agree that the conviction should be upheld regardless of what Juan was doing?
Absolutely. I definitely think it was harmless error in this case.
I do too. He was oddly aggressive with the wrong people, but I don't know that it was so far outside the bounds that it really skewed her case. And I actually don't believe the media attention did impact.
No more than any other case.
No more than any other case. Correct.
Yeah, I totally agree with all of that also.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for that update. So update on Juan Martinez and the state of Jodi's conviction. And there's also a very interesting update with Jodi's attorney, her former attorney, Kirk Nurmi, who represented Jodi in her murder trial. And he was assigned by the public defender's office to this case, which many people don't know. So Kirk Nurmi, people think, or a lot of people had thought that he volunteered to take on this case. And I'll tell you why that's relevant in a little bit. But he was, in fact, with the PD's office. Kirk Nurmi, and I'm sorry, Jillian, you said it earlier. Kirk Nurmi represented Jodi with Jennifer Wilmot.
Megan, hang on a second, because I think we were disconnected.
We're live.
All right, we are back.
Okay, sorry about that, everyone. We got disconnected after an hour. So I'll go back to talking about the developments with the other, one of the other main attorneys, and this was Jodi's defense attorney, lead counsel Kirk Nurmi. Kirk Nurmi was assigned by the public defender's office, and again, I'll mention later on why that's important. But I want everyone to understand that, again, public defender as opposed to volunteering to take the case. Kirk actually tried to get off this case several times. He left the public defender's office in 2011 thinking that if he left the office, he wouldn't have to take the case with him. But he was wrong because he was ordered to stay on the case. He motioned 10 times at 10 separate times to get off of this case, and was denied on all of those motions. Do either of you remember this or know why he wanted to get off the case?
I don't remember. I remember him wanting to get off the case, and I remember him being denied, but I don't remember why.
Yeah, I want to know why.
So there was a couple things. One of the things he said Jodi was absolutely excessively demanding and literally demanded his full-time attention. And when she didn't get it, and this is according to Kirk Nurmi, she would have temper tantrums. And he said she threatened him a number of times to ruin his life, his reputation, his career. And he said, people have threatened me before, but in her case, she actually went out of her way to make some of these things happen, to, report me to the court or to talk to reporters about me or to smear me. He also said, and probably, two more things. One of the things was that he was receiving threats, constant death threats, and he was receiving them from people who thought, again, he volunteered to take this case, and how could you sleep at night? And he's like, well, I didn't want this case, and, but then there was the other camp. He got threats from Jodi supporters who were like, you're not doing a good enough job to support her, and, so he was being threatened all round. And finally, he said that he really did not agree with the legal strategy. So the strategy of painting Travis as an abuser and the allegations of pedophilia, he said that was not his idea. And
How did he do it then? Wasn't he the lead counsel?
He was the lead counsel, but as he explained, or he's explained in a lot of interviews, it was Jodi's call. And as he said, she said these things happen. And, he's talking about what you have to allow your client to say. And obviously, I don't know all the rules in the courtroom and of trial, but she said this happened and we couldn't disprove it. So we had to let her tell her story. She adamantly insisted on telling her story. He didn't think it was the right strategy, but he said Jodi was in charge.
Wow.
So
yeah, I definitely see that.
Yeah.
I can see that too, right? Yeah. So he represented her all the way through to her 2 sentencing trials. And Jillian, I think you mentioned this briefly, but I'm not sure if this came across. Jodi had, in her first sentencing trial, they were hung. So if you recall, she got 2 sentencing trials. Right. And in the second one, they were hung too. So then it went to the judge, and the judge gave her that sentence, or maybe it automatically goes to life after.
If it's a death penalty case and the jury's hung, then the judge can't impose death. So
right. Okay. So Kirk was with her the whole time. He was pretty much released after her sentence, and then in 2015, he released the first of a 3-part book series, and it was called Trapped with Miss Arias. I just want you to know that I am going to get this book and I'm going to read it, but I didn't have time before this, so let me just say that. But he divulges in this book apparently a lot of inside baseball about the case, and he apparently even talks about his theory of what he thinks actually happened the night of the crime.
And what is that?
And this is interesting. So he doesn't give it all away. You know, in every interview he does, he's smart. He wants people to buy the book. So he'll say a little bit and then say, but if you really want to know, you should probably buy my book. But this is what I could find that he alluded to in a couple of interviews. He said that he thinks that Jodi went over to Travis's house to get some things back from him, and an altercation ensued. And he doesn't say how or why, but that is how the murder basically came. But if you think about it, it's really interesting because he's saying, and he's giving his version of what he really believes is true, and he doesn't think there was premeditation.
Does he talk about the gun? I guess in the book he probably does.
In the book he does, yeah, but unfortunately not yet. I haven't read the book, so I'm going to reserve my judgment, but I think it's interesting that Amy already brought this up. I think that there was plenty of evidence of premeditation. Those gas cans, nobody does that. Nobody gets, maybe a couple people do on a long trip, but the gas cans, the turning off her cell phone in certain places, didn't she color her hair, if I'm not mistaken? I thought there was enough evidence of premeditation. Amy's not sure. Jillian, what do you think?
Yes, I mean, without a doubt. I think, to be honest, I feel like, especially because that's kind of what I do now, cover a lot of cases. So in trials, there are so many other cases that I've covered that do not have nearly the amount of evidence that Jodi's case had. So
I think so too. Okay.
Yeah. For me, yeah. And there's too many reasons to go into. We could do a whole live that's about, why it was premeditated. But.
Right. Of course. Okay. I just wanted to touch on that briefly. What happened after this is that Jodi Arias clearly sued Kirk Nurmi for breaching attorney-client privilege, right? Because you're not supposed to divulge your client's secrets. Mm-hmm. He responded, well, you're not supposed to talk about anything that's discussed.
Did he get disbarred for that? Did he get disbarred? Sorry.
Stealing my thunder. No, sorry. And I didn't mean to look excited about it. So he responded by saying that Jodi opened the door with false assertions. And she gave an interview in which she very clearly said that it was Kirk Nurmi's defense strategy to paint Travis Alexander as a pedophile. And he said, okay, this is what he said. He was willing to let it go when she said it. He's like, I knew it was a lie, but I was willing to let it go. But here's what happened. In 2015, or maybe it was right around that time, he discovered that he had cancer and that it was pretty serious and he was going to have to go through serious chemo, and they gave him odds of survival of 70%. And he's like, look, 70% may sound good to someone else, but when they're talking about your life, that's a 30% chance that I might not make it and be here. And he said that it really concerned him. His legacy concerned him. He said he had been trapped with Jodi. He couldn't escape her. She had told lies. And he said that he wrote the book because if he passed, he did not want Jodi's lies to be the only thing that people knew about him. He said that he wanted to impose truth on her lies. He wanted to set the record straight. And he said, look, to be honest, Jodi Arias has a a record of, basically of tarnishing the reputation of deceased men in her life who she thinks have wronged him. And I had lived with her for so long, I couldn't escape her. I wasn't about to let her do that to me in death. That's his explanation.
He's also probably going to make a few dollars on the book too, no?
I'm sure he already has. So what happens, right? The bar, he goes to a hearing, of course, because this is, I haven't read the books, but from what I've read, there's some real information that should not have been in there if based on attorney-client privilege. Although, again, his defense is, I think there's a doctrine, it's like the sword and shield doctrine, and I don't know much about it, but it's something to the effect of if his client opens the door by divulging certain information, I think that he's allowed to in some way respond, but I'm not sure it applies here, and I'm not sure that he didn't go way too far anyway if it did. So he goes to the bar hearing, and basically what happened is the bar found that he breached, the privilege and, ethical violations here. So they were going to suspend his license for 4 years. But instead, he actually forfeited his license. This is interesting because Kirk had talked about the dream of owning his own practice, and that was really what his plan was when he left the public defender's office. But he said after the Arias trial, he never wanted to practice law again. He said he was done, and he was afraid if he didn't forfeit that license that he might fall back on it in a couple of years. And he said, look, I didn't want the opportunity for me to fall back on it. I wanted to move on with my life and start fresh.
Yeah. Wow. That's surprising. I had no idea.
Yeah. So I'm sorry.
I don't blame him.
Yeah.
No. Oh no, I can't. I mean, no, you can't blame him either. So he forfeited his license. Now he does a live show. It's like a one-man show. It's called Overcoming Jodi Arias. And
Put it on.
yes. No, I think he does it like in person. I think it's like
A traveling show?
like a stand-up show or something like that, right? I mean, obviously, if it came around here, I would probably check it out. But he's obviously written books. He's written the 3 books. He wrote a diet book, and there might be one other book because he lost a tremendous amount of weight. Part of it was stress and he got sick, but part of it was dieting. And he reported that he's actually been in remission from cancer for 4 years now, which is great. And he said that if he hits 1 more year, they'll declare him cancer-free.
Wow.
Great. I mean, obviously I'm happy his health is, I'm happy he's doing well. Right. I would never say anything about that. It just seems like he's trying to capitalize on it a lot monetarily.
So that was the question, right?
But that seems icky a little. I don't know. But,
so that's the question. Juan Martinez wrote a book too, of course.
Yeah, but a traveling show? Maybe I just don't understand exactly what that is. I have to look into that.
Yeah, maybe I need to look into it more. I heard him say it, that he does like a one-man show. It's like a 90-minute thing. He said some of it's like comedic, but some of it's serious. And it's really about how he's like, look, I'll never overcome. That's his point. I'll never overcome Jodi Arias. I have to live with this now. And, it's like ingrained in me, but how he's done his best to move away from it, I guess. So, Amy, maybe in an update, you'll let us know about the one-man show. No, I'm kidding. Sorry. So that is it for Kirk Nurmi. And now I think 2 more things I'd like to do. One, I just want to talk about our final thoughts. Amy and I do this a lot on our show. We just talk about whether or not we think the criminal justice system got it right or not as pertaining to this case. So do we think that the system got it right in terms of the conviction and the sentence? Who wants to kick us off?
I'll go. I think they got it right. Megan, as you know, I promised you I'm not going to go into it, but I don't agree with the death penalty at all. So I, of course, think that life without parole is the correct sentence for Jodi. I don't think that there are many people that life without parole is a necessary sentence for. I think Jodi might be, she's so just callous, no remorse, no empathy. People like that probably should never see, freedom again.
Okay.
I completely agree. I think that they absolutely got it right and correct sentence. I don't know if you guys remember, but after she was sentenced, and who knows if she really meant it because she is a known liar, but she did say that she wanted the death penalty anyway. So, I mean, I think, she's where she belongs. I really hope she never gets out. It doesn't seem like she's going to. And yeah, I mean, I think it'll be interesting to see what happens with everybody in the case. Like what happened.
She's doing, from what I understand, she has all these fans. She's selling her work, and she has a boyfriend, like a serious boyfriend. So
of course she does. I mean, I'm not even surprised about that.
Yeah.
So let me say, the justice system, yes, got it right. Conviction, absolutely. Sentence, I would say yes. Life without the possibility of parole, certainly. I'm also not a death penalty advocate, as you know, Amy. Once in a while, there are cases for which I cannot help but inherently feel that the death penalty might be appropriate. And because it is an option, or because it was an option, I'm not entirely sure that this isn't just the case for which the death penalty might be appropriate. Mm-hmm. So I would say mostly I believe it, but there was some gut feeling and some gut part of me that, when we went through the heinous nature of the crime and what she did and denigrating him again and whatnot, I went, this is a woman for which this might actually be appropriate. So I'm going to say mostly I do believe the punishment was correct. Amy, you had we had someone write in with a different point of view, wasn't that right? Someone who wrote in, who wanted us to cover, or didn't think Jodi was guilty, or thought perhaps.
Yeah. So the reason I want to share this is I always think it's important to look at the other side, because although we all believe the justice system got it right, there are people that believe the justice system did not get it right. And of course, I think we need to honor the other side's opinion. And it was also one of our listeners who wrote in, and I always want to keep an open ear to our listeners. So I just want to talk a little bit about what this one listener said.
Okay.
So she hypothesized that, I don't understand the first part, so I'm just going to skip over it. But the prosecutor claimed that just seconds after the close-up of Travis in the shower, we all know that infamous picture, right? Jodi stabbed him with her left hand. However, it's been noticed that when examined, the clear shower door was closed, because you can see the difference between the water falling on his face and water dripping on the floor, making it impossible to stab him. Also, Jodi did not mention the door being closed, so that provides credibility to her saying that she doesn't remember. I don't agree with the listener, but I appreciate the comment and the other point of view.
Wasn't the comment ahead of that, or the point of view, that she believed that Jodi's story that Travis was enraged?
That is correct. She did believe that.
She believed the self-defense kind of aspect of it.
Absolutely, yep. So the idea was that Travis was almost half a foot taller and more than 50 pounds heavier than Jodi. So he was filled with rage and adrenaline. So given those conditions, that probably took many stabs to subdue him.
So she's explaining why maybe she stabbed him so many times and how it might have been self-defense.
Exactly. So she's saying it could have been self-defense, because one stab would not subdue someone who's that much larger than you.
I mean, look, I've read people who believe that and who support Jodi, and that's certainly fine. I just know the three of us are not in that camp after.
Entitled to their opinion.
Absolutely.
So I appreciate the feedback.
I appreciate the feedback too. And actually, maybe that brings us to the next part. We've had some, we had some requests for questions and opinions. So maybe we will get to the point where, if you guys feel ready to answer some questions that might have come in while we've been doing the show.
Yeah, let's do it.
All right, let's do it. Jillian, what you wanna give us some questions our way?
Yes, but because we were disconnected, unfortunately, if anybody submitted questions on the first live, I don't know if I could have access to those.
Oh, no.
But if you submit a question now, we can answer them. There is one that I saw here, and it was basically asking if any of us had covered Jodi on any of our podcasts.
Not yet.
Do you want to talk about, if you have not, why not?
Right. So Jodi was one of those cases that had been covered, so much. And I thought the same kind of thing, I think maybe Amy and I did, Jillian, that, well, can we add anything at this point? And has it been overcovered? And Amy and I both have so many cases that we were interested in that maybe people don't know, or just where our literally we have lists of like 20, 30, 40 cases that we were just interested in. And even though I liked the Jodi Arias case, I wasn't sure the same thing. Like, I felt like there were others that I could do a lot more with.
Yeah. I like, we're also new at this. We only have, how many episodes do we have?
20 for Women in Crime.
So we only have 20 episodes. So I think like Megan said, we have a long list. But for me, I tend to gravitate towards cases that are not as covered, not as popular. I think Megan's probably the same. But like Megan mentioned, there are some cases we cover that are a little more popular, but there's something new, or at least there's a discussion point.
Right.
So, what about you? What about you, Jillian? Has it ever been on your list?
It has never been on my list to cover it, even though I have been requested this quite often, actually. And I think the reason why is just because kind of, what you guys said, I don't think I can add anything to it. I can tell you what was said in the trial, but everybody's been pretty vocal about, their roles in it afterwards, from Juan Martinez to Kirk Nurmi, wrote a book. And,
right.
So it's like, even if I were to interview somebody close to the case, it's like, I just don't think that there's anything more to say or that I can add. And furthermore, it's a closed case. And, I kind of would be, I guess, happy if she never got any more attention again. And we focused our efforts on other cases,
Yeah.
That's kind of like just where my head's at. It's like, yeah, I guess I could cover it if you really wanted me to, but I prefer not to.
I have a question for Jillian.
Oh, yeah.
Will Jillian cover the Melanie McGuire case at some point?
So the funny thing about that is you guys were nice enough to share the trial transcripts with me.
Well,
and,
I think someday.
Yeah, and that is a case that, I'm definitely interested in. Amy, I do remember you asking me when we met if I thought she was guilty or not.
Ooh.
Yeah.
I said that, yes, I do think she's guilty.
I'm with you. Guilty as sin.
Oh, you do? I thought you guys did not think that.
Julian hasn't been listening to our episode.
No, I did. I swear. I almost listened to all of them, and maybe I missed like the last.
No,
hard on that.
It was like episode 18 at that point.
Go that hard though, and you didn't say guilty as sin at first, but
I did not. No, I don't. I'm kind of just being silly. I go back and forth. I'm not that staunch with guilty, but I lean towards guilty.
Yeah, sure. I lean towards innocence. No, I believe innocence. Yeah.
Okay.
For an interesting ending. Anyway, go ahead. Sorry.
So this isn't a question, but probably watching crime shows said, made the comment that most people probably can't believe that a pretty girl is capable of slicing throats to almost cut off heads. Do you guys think that Jodi's appearance had any effect on any of the jurors? Maybe why she didn't get the death penalty?
I think not only, I think her race, her class, and her gender. If she was a non-white woman who was from, a lower class in society, she would have gotten the death penalty for sure. That's my opinion anyway. So I think her life was spared because of that.
100% agree. I think all those factors, but I definitely think the fact that she was a woman saved her life. If it was the same crime and a man committed it, death penalty.
You think her race too, though?
I do. Yeah, I do. I think I do. I agree exactly with what you said, but I think it's the woman thing, really. Yeah. It saved her. She's a woman.
And the attractiveness, I think, she was an attractive woman, not just a woman, an attractive woman, young. So I think it's...
Yeah.
So Marilyn asked if we know if there's a history of mental illness in Jodi's family.
Oh, it's a great question.
It is a great question.
That's a good question. I remember at the time of the trial looking at, trying to research her family, and I remember there was very little public.
I tried to do the same because I wanted to talk about the biological side of things. If there was, in fact, a biological side to look at, it was really, I didn't find much at all.
I remember finding very little about her childhood at all and about her family. I don't know how they were able to keep that information out. I would have thought anything they could find would have been out there. So anyone who's watching or listening, if you know anything that we don't, feel free to share it with us on Instagram or somewhere else, because I would be super curious myself. I don't remember seeing anything like that though.
Okay. Journey of a Blonde Girl asked, do y'all think the premeditation and I'm trying to say y'all, just like I should.
I caught that.
Y'all think the premeditation was just because he was going to Mexico with another woman? So that goes towards motive. What do you guys think?
I think that was the straw that broke the camel's back.
Agreed.
But I think leading up to it, there was, he was starting to push away because he wanted someone that was marriage material, and she was just his side piece. And I think she couldn't handle it.
Well, I agree. I also, from what I had read or for what I remember, he was initially supposed to bring He was initially supposed to bring Jodi on that trip, and then changed his mind, told her no, and said he was bringing Mimi Hall on it. And so while it was leading up to that, Amy, yeah, that I think for sure, when she found out that he was going with another woman on this trip, I think that was it. That was the trigger.
Mm-hmm.
Jillian?
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I think it was the straw that broke the camel's back. Weren't they supposed to travel like the world together? They had all these plans, and I believe like they even had a book where they were like checking off, they were supposed to go. And so I think like him taking somebody else somewhere was just, made her enraged. So let me see.
We have any others?
Well, first of all, shout out to my friend Brittany who's watching.
Yay! Hi, Brittany.
I have a question while you're doing that. Is this going to be available to watch after someone is asking?
Yes.
It is.
We will post a recorded version of all of this.
Thank you.
So, I feel like how it's like getting darker and darker in my room.
I just noticed that actually.
It's long. Do we still have people listening to us, or are we just by ourselves at this point?
No.
No, we have people listening. And in fact, so Brittany has a question, or like she said, this brings up something interesting, which I think I totally agree. What if trials were held like the show Love is Blind? She's like a reality show.
I love it.
And defendants' appearances were hidden from the jury. Interesting, actually.
Wait, can I just address this one? Because I teach policy analysis, crime policy analysis, and I have my students come up with, they can either, basically they come up with their own crime policies. And one of the most brilliant papers I've ever read, and this is in like 10 years of teaching this class, was titled The Veil of Justice. And the suggestion was that the defendants have, either a curtain or something that would basically block so that jurors would never know their race, their age, their ethnicity. So I think that's that sounds exactly like what she's saying, right?
Yeah. And
that was brilliant.
Megan, Megan, do you remember when we were in England and the way they hid the witnesses?
Yeah.
So during trials, they would have a curtain around witnesses to block witness intimidation.
Oh.
It's kind of similar, it's along the same lines. I think it's brilliant. Megan, I remember you telling me about that. I was so impressed by that.
I remember the paper was I was like so blown away by that one. So yeah, I do think it would make a world of difference. And I actually think it's a great idea. I think there was like some implication that it like somehow violated the right to confront your accuser or something of that, like directly, but like, let's put that aside. It was a great policy.
Yeah.
So fun question from Marilyn. Who would play Jodi in a movie?
Ooh, that's a really good question.
I'm going to age myself, and I'm going to choose Winona Ryder or Marissa Tomei. Or Natalie Portman, maybe.
I was thinking Natalie Portman just because I love her, but she's too sweet.
What about like Jennifer Love Hewitt?
Oh, now that's aging yourself.
Yeah, my grandma used to tell me I looked like her in high school. I had dark hair.
Jennifer Love Hewitt. Oh, that's right, you had dark hair. So Jodi would be also like have been in the movie. If they were doing her life, she'd be in her 20s. So we probably should have thought about people who were in their like 20s. Now I'm aging myself. I don't know. Sorry.
Ageist.
I don't know who the youngins are these days in Hollywood.
Oh well. Sorry.
What's the name of Kirk Nermy's book again?
Trapped with Miss Arias. And there are 3 parts, actually. So it's interesting because he put one out a couple of years ago. It was the first one. And I think the first one covers all the pretrial stuff. And then the next 2 are really about the trial and what happened with them during trial and his alternative theory.
Okay. Brooklyn Marie asked, why do you guys think she took the stand? I feel like it's not common for a defendant to testify in their trials.
Because she's narcissistic. That's honestly, I mean, she craves spotlight, she craves attention.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's I mean, as we know, it's not advisable to take the stand.
She had to, though. There was no choice. She's the only one who could.
Self-defense.
If you're using self-defense, there's absolutely no way she could have gotten around it. I think that being said, Amy, I think she wanted to. I think she wanted to get up there, and I think she was happy to, but she had to. There was no way around it in this case. I don't know.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. She had to in order to, argue self-defense, but she definitely loved it. I mean, she went on and on about every aspect of her life, and I mean, I even remember sitting in my office and getting like kind of bored, like, okay.
I was too.
Yeah.
All right.
Emma Roberts. A lot of people are saying. Do you think she would have been convicted as easily if the jury didn't find the digital camera photos?
No, I don't even know that they would have had a case against her, or they wouldn't have had a case against her so quickly had it not been for the camera. That was where she proved herself. That's
how they basically, in addition to the friends giving over her name. I mean, I definitely think she would have, eventually it would have come around to her.
I think so too.
Just make it come around to her too, but that was also the big piece. That was the big win. That was the slam dunk.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Has any ex-boyfriend, this is from Sabrina, has any ex-boyfriend come out with their experience with Jodi? So we know in the trial, she did have some of her ex-boyfriends did testify, or at least one that I can remember, that Daryl, and he had said they were together for 4 years. She was not, she was not violent at all. She, perfectly normal relationship. But he did say that after, I guess they were still living together when she met Travis, and he said that after she met Travis that she started to change. He noticed a change in her, and, suddenly she was very interested in the Mormon religion. She said that she, they couldn't have sex anymore because she was now going to hold out. And then I think it was like very shortly after they broke up, and then she, hooked up with Travis. So that's the only ex-boyfriend that I know of outside of trial. Do we know of anybody who?
No, that's the only one I knew of as well.
Oh, and there was another one, I believe, that did come up too. I don't want to throw out people.
At trial?
Yeah, at trial. It was, do you remember when she was accused of, or when Juan Martinez at cross-examination brought out the messages that she was writing in the magazine from jail?
Yes.
Yeah, and basically she had written out like a coded message, and it said something along the lines of, you're saying,
oh, yes,
yeah, like you're not going along with the story I've been going on. That was apparently to one of her ex-boyfriends. I think it was Matt, but I don't want to say his last name.
No, that's okay.
Nothing to do with it.
You don't need to.
Do you think, so Pink Posh Resale wants to know, do you think she had a psychotic break, like a nervous breakdown? That's for you guys.
No.
I don't.
No, why not?
I think they could have, if they had any evidence to back that, they could have claimed like temporary insanity or something, right? And they didn't even go that way. I don't even think.
Right.
Because I think also in order to, I don't know, Megan, I'm not sure.
I think that the premeditation and the level of premeditation sort of negates that a little bit, not entirely, because you could still say that someone had a break and then did all these things, but I think there was a very cool, calm, collected lead up that does not indicate a psychotic break to me.
Not only that, she got rid of the gun. Like she clearly knew, she had the right of mind enough to know, oh, I shouldn't have the gun. Oh, I should, not stop and get gas, right? Like it was immediately
start making the phone calls and covering her tracks. So no, I don't think there's any indication of that.
Probably watching crime shows wants to know, what are your opinions about the fans/fan clubs for killers?
I've talked about this a lot in my class because I teach serial killers as well. And there are it's kind of like, there is an attraction to certain figures. There were the Bundy followers, right? And then there were the Richard Ramirez followers. And these are people who committed these heinous crimes, but there is an attraction to some of the darkness of it. And it's definitely it's exacerbated a little bit more when you have a good looking defendant, to be honest. It becomes more of a fan club. With Jodi, I think it's probably that a lot of people, she's very charming and very, convincing to certain people. And I think she's able to target a certain group who feels protective over her.
Mm-hmm.
Amy, sorry.
Nope.
Okay.
I fully agree.
Right.
Marilyn wants to know, did she ever say where she chucked the gun? And she did. She said when she was driving in the desert, she threw it out of the window.
That's a great answer.
They tried to look for it, though. They never found it, right?
No, not that I was able to see it.
Because it was a very great vague somewhere along the stretch of 1,000 miles.
Yeah.
They chucked it in the desert.
Yeah.
Great answer.
Did they ever, so Lil Rascal Kitty wants to know, did they ever explain where his roommates were when the murder occurred?
It's funny. I always think of that. Like, why did they not hear anything?
They weren't home.
They had an alibi.
I feel like they were out of town, or I don't remember, but that did come up in trial. I don't remember what exactly was said, but I know that they definitely were not home. Yeah. And if I recall correctly, do you guys remember that they weren't home the day it happened, but wasn't maybe one of them home and then just thought Travis was in his room?
That's what it was. The one who had answered the door when the friends went over, he was home for He was home for a couple days after.
He didn't know. Okay.
He thought Travis was in Hawaii because he remembered, they weren't best friends, but he remembered Travis on this trip.
Not to be graphic, but wouldn't there be a stench of a decomposing body?
That's what I said, and that's what the police said, and that's why at first they were kind of like, but you live in this house. But I think that, the way the house was organized, and I don't remember exactly, but like Travis almost had his own wing of the house.
Yeah.
I think it was far enough away that no one's going up to his room. You know what I mean? Like they're meeting in the common areas, and it was big enough that no one had to get too close.
Right.
We got any more, Jillian?
I think that's about it.
All right. Well, thank you. Thank you for writing in with questions. It was great. Love it. And feel free to contact us.
Yeah, send us more on Instagram or wherever. I don't know.
Yeah. And okay, we'll just end with thank you so much for joining us for this live event. Jillian, it was great to work with you and do this. And Amy, as always, we appreciate you guys tuning in. We hope you had a great night, and we did. And we'll catch you all very soon. All right.
And you guys want to give a last plug for your podcast?
Oh, Amy, go ahead. Plug us, Amy.
Women in Crime. Well, we have Direct Appeal, which is our serialized podcast about Melanie McGuire, who was convicted of the murder and dismemberment of her husband. And she is serving essentially a life sentence in New Jersey. And then Women in Crime. And we cover a different case every week. And we would love you to come on over and listen.
Nice. And do you guys
every 2 weeks? I'm sorry, not every week.
I was going to say every other week right now.
Sorry, Jillian. What were
you have a big announcement to make? What about, do you guys have any good upcoming cases you're working on?
Oh, we have a couple good ones. We're actually we're each taking one that was requested by a listener and someone who wrote us in. So, but I think I want mine to be a little bit of a surprise.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I will tell you in the next month or so, it'll be a case that's a friend of a friend. So it's a little more personal. So that's kind of interesting. She's now serving time for murdering her boyfriend. And, she claims she was abused, not like Jodi kind of abused, but really abused. I think there's a lot of corroborating evidence that supports it. So, it's always different when it's, I didn't know her personally, but I know someone who knew her very well. So look for that. Nikki Adamando, case out of New York. So.
I can't wait for you to cover that one. What about you, Jillian? Nice. Anything on your podcast? Any news? Anything you want to announce before we go?
Nothing to announce, but I have a lot of good cases, I feel, in the pipeline. So on Monday, I'm going to be releasing.
Oh,
thank you. Monday, I'm going to be releasing a part 2 of what I think is honestly one of the most head-scratching cases I've ever covered. It's the Henri Segura case. So look it up, or better yet, just check out part 1 that came out this past Monday, and then part 2 that I'm releasing this coming Monday. It's wild. It's a great case. And then I also, in the pipeline, I have the Newman Raja case coming up, and one that's close to Chicago, Laquan McDonald's. That's one that'll be coming out in a couple weeks. So yeah, some good ones.
And Jillian, congratulations on your 2020 episode. I watched, of course, sitting with popcorn and everything. Fabulous. Congratulations. It was great to see. I know the case quite well also, so.
Thank you. Because recording it during, this COVID, everything got messed up. It was originally supposed to be really cool. I was supposed to fly out to New York and do the interview there, and it would have been, I think a little bit more focused on the podcast. They had me read all these parts and stuff. So what ended up happening is that literally a week prior to their air dates, we had their film crew filming me at a studio, a local studio here in Chicago. So it wasn't what it was supposed to be, but it was still a really cool experience and so much fun. And you guys are also going to be on 2020, which is another thing we have in common.
We are, but we were in the same boat as you, and I think we were probably about 2 weeks behind you. So we filmed half of our interview, and they filmed a lot, and we were supposed to get aired in May, and then it was June. And now, because of everything that happened, and because summer reruns are in, we are up in September. And ours is about the Melanie McGuire case, actually. So we're excited. I'm excited. I was a little disappointed that it got slowed down, but that's okay. If it's going to be good and done well and cover everything, then we're excited about that. Right,
now,
Amy?
You guys are already in New York, right? Or in
Yes, we are. So it's actually
the accent, right?
we're in New Jersey, so close enough. But Jillian, if you ever come to New York,
I definitely will hit you guys up. Absolutely. We'll have to have a glass of wine in person.
Yes.
I would love it. Ladies, thank you so much. This was a lot of fun, and it was great.
Thank you everyone for listening. It's weird because we don't see you, but we know you're there somewhere. Right? It's weird, but it's cool. Thank you guys.
All right. Thank you guys.
Have a good night. Thank you, everyone.
You too.
Bye.